folks, so check it out. We're in the conference room, which is kind of bare at this point, and we put up this thing. This is a whiteboard, and it's awesome, but also very heavy and required a lot of, like, 5 holding points to get it right. So anyway, yeah, so here's the rest of the room to give you some context, because it's going to look pretty boring when I am up there. In fact, we're going to move the plant up there to make it look more vibrant, I guess. So here we go. Got Michelle in here. She's like cleaning up. Come on in. Don't be shy now. There you go. No, I need that. I need that. Yeah. I'm using it to kind of tilt up the camera so it doesn't cut off my head. In fact, can you take a look at that? Does this look natural? Or is it like my head is like right there?
No,
my head should be like 3/4 the way up.
Yeah, it's a little less.
Is it still down? All right. All right, I'm just going to assume that's better. It feels right, and I can like move in and out like this. Hopefully I won't knock the camera off of my poor man's tripod, which is this ladder. We'll get a real tripod someday. So folks, welcome to Gatelynomics 101, and it is economics according to Gately. It's not a science, it's an experience. So today I want to talk more about business. I want to talk about kind of how you structure things, if that's a thing. And I'm also going to talk about payroll taxes, not an opinion, but only what are they and how do they work. So in fact, let's start with that. So here's how payroll taxes work. If you are an employer and you want to give money to somebody for labor, there's only 2 ways of doing it. One is as a subcontractor, which I do not advise. Oh, and by the way, I'm not a CPA or anything, so I'm not trying to give you tax advice of any kind. I'm just saying this is what I found out about how to run a business. So if that's not okay, let me know, because I certainly don't want to be overstepping my bounds here. So you've got so you got a subcontractor, and that's like they own their own carpet cleaning business, and they come in and clean your carpets. I won't go into subcontractors right now, except therefore saying if you're going to start your own business, I would not use subcontractors. And then, so at the end of every year, for your subcontractors, you make a reporting to the government about how much money you paid them. Because apparently the United States federal government wants to know how much money is coming to you. They think that information is their business. So, then you've got employees. So now there's like mountains of laws governing employees. And I've done my best to kind of navigate all that. And I think people don't hire employees to some extent because they're afraid of it. They're afraid of like, well, what are the details, what's involved? They hear horror stories. They're going to have to pay all these taxes on them. I can't afford to pay taxes on them. But let me tell you how it works. Let's say, I'm going to make a bar here. Let's say this is, just for the sake of argument, this is your $10 an hour employee. So this bar is $10, so that's the $5 mark. All right, so what happens is when you are an employer, you become a tax collector for the federal government and the state government. Meaning you have to collect the taxes from this person. They fill out a form saying this is how much taxes I think I should be paying. That's their exemptions. This is called a W-2. And not their exemptions, I'm sorry. Or is it called exemptions? See, there's that thing. But the number they put on there and sign for it is how much should be withdrawn from their paycheck. So typically, if it's a single person with no kids and no exemptions, they might be taxed higher. But if they have a lot of exemptions, then I think they're called exemptions, then they're taxed at a lower rate because the government is anticipating that they're going to have a lot of, they're going to pay lower taxes because they have kids, for example. Yeah, so as an employer, you are effectively a tax collector. and you have to take the money out and you have to pass it on to the federal government. And then at the end of the year, the federal government, or at the end of the tax year in April, the federal government reconciles with your employee. And they file a tax return the following April, and then the government says, well, guess what? Your employer's withheld the right amount, or it's too little or too much. And ideally, it'll be the right amount. That's the idea. But the point is, you, the employer, are now required to perform a service for the federal government for no pay. You don't get paid for this. You can either A, do it yourself. To my knowledge, it's not illegal to try and figure it all out and fill out the right forms and do the whole thing. Or you can hire somebody to do it for you, which is a tax accountant. So, back to small business ownership. If you want to have employees, it's not a problem. Go seek out, in the United States, go seek out a certified public accountant, and that person will tell you either how to do it, or it's probably more efficient just to have them do it for you. There's lots of services where you just pay so much per employee, or you pay a flat amount. But there is a cost. Either you have to perform the service yourself, or you have to pay somebody to do the service for you. And I said I wouldn't give my opinion, and I think I'm going to after all. My personal opinion is I view this as a form of involuntary servitude. I spend, I'd say conservatively, 20 to 40 hours a year either working on this myself or paying somebody to work on it. It's what is called a regulatory burden, which means the tax money is transferred to the central government to use as they see fit, but the transfer itself has a labor cost to it. It's like an entropic thing, that you actually lose some heat while you're walking from one building to another. I've heard the analogy of scooping water out of a lake, and then you go to the other end of the lake and you slop some out, right? And then you dump it back in the lake, in another section of the lake. And so that's payroll taxes. But don't be afraid of them. If you're starting a business, don't be afraid of this whole thing. And I'll tell you why as we go along. So here's a guy, pay $10 an hour. Typically, you will not pay them $10 an hour. They will end up, after their taxes are withheld from their check, they will end up being paid about $9 an hour. Now, just pause for a moment and think, what effect does this have on the entire system? It means, on the net, a certain amount of the labor is being shifted, or the resources are being shifted. So you'll pay them about $9, and then there's a beautiful thing called employer-side taxes. So you will go like this. There's another, and I'm using rough estimates here. You've got to understand, I'm not an expert. I'm just a regular guy kind of trying to figure this out. And I'm telling you about it so you won't have to, reinvent the wheel. But I want to be clear, I'm not some kind of professional giving you advice. So then you pay employer-side taxes of a matching, so you pay $1 to the feds, and then you have to match that by paying another $1. And so in my case, if you only pay, let's say you only have 2 part-time employees, it might be that you only have to pay this annually. So they say, well, you paid out $2,000 in payroll, so at the end of the year you pay $200 for employer-side taxes, and it's paid annually. It can be paid quarterly. It can be paid monthly. I've even heard it can be weekly or daily. Like giant corporations actually have whole divisions dedicated to just calculating the taxes every day and making sure the taxes are paid daily. Because the federal government isn't dumb. They realize there's time use of money. That's better to be able to use the money now and, then later give you a refund. Especially if the money is devaluing. That's another factor. So, what does this actually look like? In my case, I pay them monthly. I don't know, because I haven't read 18,000 pages of tax code. I have to hire a professional to... Oh, hey, I never did the plant. Here it comes. Oh, doesn't that look nicer? So, so what it looks like is every payday, I get my checks cut, and then I look at my bank account, and my accountant has automatically withdrawn from my account all of this portion here, this whole thing, the withholding part, and the employer side taxes. And so it ends up being like a debit equal to, if you think about it, this is actually $11 an hour. It takes $11 to pay a $10 an hour employee. It's all rough numbers. And then what happens out of that $11, you're sending $2 to the federal government and to dispose of, apparently, as they see fit. So, and you know, I can't help but wonder, wouldn't it be better to let this person kind of pick what they wanted to do? You say, but Sean, what about firemen and policemen and roads? No, those are all paid for by the city, the county, or the state. Yeah, but what about the army that keeps enemy tanks off of our shores or whatever? Yeah, yes, that is a legitimate thing for the federal government to be doing. That's for another day. We're going to talk about the federal budget, the difference between a deficit and the national debt. By the way, in my travels, I found a candidate for Senate who did not know the difference between the two. There's a huge difference. So, when you're starting your business, let me start and stop. So, when you're starting your business, what you have to do, and this is usually how I draw it out. Oh, by the way, all I could find is red pens. I know in some countries that's impolite. So, you've got to look at a giant bar here. This bar represents the gross sales of your company. By the way, gross means the total, and net means what's left after you take out whatever the calculation is. So an employee will have gross pay, then they'll have what's called net pay, which is less than that. That's after taxes, basically. So we're talking about gross sales. Now, I don't want to use my own business because I don't want to tell you all the numbers. However, let's take a fictional My wife used to work for a sunglasses store in the mall. And to me that was very interesting. This is kind of my first introduction to kind of how business worked. Because she was the manager, she'd count the till, and she would do the monthly reporting, right? And I found out kind of what the numbers were. So, their gross sales were about $30,000 per month, 30K, we'll say. So we'll say in your fictional business that you're going to start, that your gross sales are going to be $30,000 a month. That seems like a lot. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. So, well, for example, there's a Hawaiian shave ice stand down on the corner, and I have done some preliminary calculations. They bring in about $10,000 a month. Can you believe that? Just from opening a little snow cone stand down on the corner, $10,000. Of course, he did build it up. He had, he invested in it, and I saw it improve over the years. In fact, I might take you down there next summer just to kind of show you what a small business can be like. So anyway, so what happens is I found out that they were paying out about $5,000 a month for all the teenagers that worked there. And my wife, at the time, I think was like 25, 26, and she was the manager. So she was like the experienced one, wrangling all these, 18, 19, and 20-year-olds. But they paid $5,000 in payroll. So this is labor. Let's use the term payroll. And then they probably had their rent, which I imagine was probably $2,000. Then they had to buy the glasses, which, if I remember right, cost them, they'd sell like $10 wholesale for like $50 or $60. So let's assume that's another $5K. I'm probably doing this disproportionately. Yeah, actually, yeah, this is not right. 2K is more like this. Okay, and then they're doing another 5K, right? Yeah, that's more like it. 5K for what would it be called? Inventory. right? Okay, and then they'd have utilities or whatever else it is. But over here, you'd have this juicy, wonderful thing called profit. And this is why you go into business. Now, when you're setting up your own business, don't confuse profit with the amount that you're going to live on. Although most small businesses, I think they start out that way. They just hope there's enough left over at the end so they can pay their own bills and so they can eat. But if you're working at your own business, you should see it as, well, it's paying you. And if you're a sole proprietorship, that goes directly to you, and then you pay taxes on that. Or if it's a corporation, you actually have to hire yourself and become one of your own employees. And then at the end, if there's profit, that goes through to you in a different way as like dividends. So anyway, so this thing is profit. So this sunglass stand was making probably 50% of their gross sales was profit. And that went back to a corporate, mega store or whatever. And then that probably got divided among all the shareholders or however it works. And that's the beauty of a business owned by a single person is it can be where that person is like managing it wisely for the benefit of the people that work there. But we're going to talk about wages at another time, because you might go, well, that's not fair, blah, blah, blah. Well, that's fine. Any of these people could go out to the mall, sign a lease, and start their own competing sunglass store. Go for it. Find a different way around it, a different solution. So 50% was profit. Now, let's get back to payroll. So, here's the beautiful thing. When you're setting up your business, you have to, as a matter of wisdom and reason, you have to include all costs in your business model. So let's say you figure out your business model and you find out that you can pay whatever, let's say you can pay your people $12 per hour. By the way, at the time, which was like the 90s, the minimum wage I think was like $4 or $5 an hour. So these people were not getting paid very much. In fact, my wife and I lived probably on about $800 a month. We lived pretty humbly, and that's a great time in your life to be there. So 12 an hour. So let's say you find out, you do your calculation, you figure out you can pay 12 an hour. Aha! You can't pay 12 an hour because this is after you add the 10% on. And by the way, that's just a round number. It's actually different than that. And you might think, oh, Sean, but payroll taxes at the federal level are only 8.25% or whatever. Yeah, but you've got to include, that's my whole point about why I'm kind of building up. You have to include everything in your calculations. You can't leave stuff out. You've got to really get that, figure out what is the real cost. There is a real cost. And it is what I call the cost of having employees, which is, are you ready? It is the cost to pay them, the labor cost of doing the payroll taxes, being an unpaid tax collector. So that burden falls on the small businessman to do that. So, but spread out over your entire payroll. The checks, the pieces of paper that they're actually on, those actually cost money. In my case, my accountants, they order them for me. They're like 50 cents each or something like that. And they are, and then it costs so much, like it costs $4 per check to process them for employees beyond a certain amount. My point is, you have to add up all the real costs. And 10% is actually not it. It's more like once you do state taxes and you factor in that you're going to have some kind of big trouble over the course of 30 years. You're going to be audited, basically, at some point in time. Some people are like, excuse me, they recoil from that. Don't recoil from that. Just do the math and figure out how much money you actually have for all of these problems. So what happens is, to pay that person 12 an hour, you actually are going to be paying out more like after everything's said and done, it's more like $14 per hour. That'd be great. Can you imagine that? Wouldn't you like a 10 to 20% pay increase? That'd be fantastic, wouldn't it? And if only this were gone. What would happen to wages if income tax were 0%? Oh, I'm plugging Ron Paul right now. This is the guy talking about that, saying income taxes should not exist. They should be 0%. So all that regulatory burden completely disappears. And I'm thinking, okay now, what would happen to that money? Well, let's look at our slide here. It could go into other things, like you pay for advertising. Yeah, probably what happens here is the megacorp or whatever has big expenses for advertising, and they provide like a franchising type support. But my point is, it would go into advertising. Now the advertiser on the net needs to hire 2 new guys at his firm to make up for that, because there's more demand. Or the money might go into rents for improved facilities. Or it might go into improving facilities, buying furniture, for example. Oh, now there's demand for furniture. In my case, I'd like to put it back into wages and pay my people better. Wouldn't that be awesome? Because that would be gone entirely. And but there's a trade-off, which is all the functions that the federal government is performing, other than the essential ones that can, there it is. It's tariffs. If you look at the federal budget, and it relates to this, because it affects, and that's Gatelynomics. I'm just a guy trying to figure it all out and find, why are things happening to me? What is the system that I live in? And part of that is, well, how does this all affect me, like in my life? Boots on the ground is what I want to say. So, yeah. So if the federal government went from this big to this big, 1/10 the size, oh, we'd have to roll back spending to 80s levels. It could be paid for out of tariffs and miscellaneous fees that the government collects. You could, and this is a big topic, so no need to comment on it or to get overly worked up about it. But my point is, if government were shrunk down to a small enough size, it could be paid for without income taxes. That's the trade-off. You wouldn't need to file your taxes. And you might think, well, but I get a refund every year. Yes, because you were overcharged. You still paid. That refund's just the overcharge. Well, I got all my taxes back. Yeah, you live at the poverty level, and guess what? And this is why I did this chart. Because, in fact, I want to get rid of this. I want to show you something. So, here's how it works. Oh yeah, aren't you glad you came here? So, let's say this is your gross sales, your gross income for your business, right? And so you have all these expenses. You've got payroll, you've got inventory, you've got your rent, you've got utilities, you've got, what else is it? You've got advertising, right? And then whatever's left over, this is your profit. And by the way, how big this thing is called your profit margin. All of those taxes and regulatory burdens, and like my accountants, if I call them or I email them with a question, I get a bill for that at the end of the month. And one time, I even had to ask, because they were like, here's your bill, do you have questions about your bill? And I was like frozen for a second. I'm like, are they going to charge me $15 if I have a question about my bill? You know, it's that messed up. But my point is, it inserts an expense here. So don't be afraid of employees. Don't be afraid of them at all. If you find out you can pay your employees $12 an hour, Don't panic and say, well, that's going to cost me $14 an hour actually, and that's going to distort this entire thing. Do the other, say, well, then with this, all the taxes and regulatory burden, I can't pay $12 an hour actually, can I? I can only pay $10 an hour. You don't deduct it from their wages. You simply take it as a factor in considering how much the actual wage can be and how you set up your business. So this number never comes up. And this number never comes up. You simply go in and you say, I can afford to pay you $10 an hour. Taxes, all these payroll taxes, have the general effect of reducing wages. Plain and simple. Because there's only two ways to relieve this burden. Well, there's lots of ways, but the place in this that has the most flexibility is not advertising, because the advertising is like sacrosanct. That's how you get the money to begin with. Your rent, your landlord's not, you'd be like, yeah, I need to pay $300 a month less rent. He's not going to go down on that. Your utilities aren't going to go down, notably. It's wages. Wages always suffer. They suffer the first, because that's where the flexibility is, unless you're cranked right down to minimum wage. And I would dare say most businesses are not like that. So, for example, if I found out that there was a new tax of 3% on wages, I would be obliged as a business, and because you might think, well, why don't you just take them out of your profit, you greedy bastard? Well, that's why I'm running the business. Protecting this, that's why you're in business. If you get rid of this or you reduce it, there's a magic point where it kind of snaps and you just go, oh, okay, well, I'm just not going to do this. Aha! So here's where it gives. You either have to increase your prices, which makes your gross income go up, theoretically, or you have to, on the other side, reduce the wages that you pay. Or, in my case, I have on the net increased wages year after year. You can simply not increase them as much. And that's what would happen. If I had a 3% burden on wages through taxation, well, guess I'm not given a 10% raise this year. I'm only given a 5% raise. Or I'd go in and I'd go, okay, I'm going to increase all my prices by whatever it is. But on the net, it pressures the wrong people. You can't, that's why you didn't get a refund. That's why. Because all the stuff you bought went up in price. It was an illusion. It is an illusion that you're not paying those taxes. It's because businesses have a vertical ability to push down all of their expenses onto the consumers. And it happens like from one business to the next. I want to buy some chairs. Guess what? Wrapped up in this chair is all that one leg of this chair is all the regulatory burden that the chair maker had. All the taxation, his tax accountants, all the entropy is in this leg. And the prices went up. And it squeezes. That's the sensation you're feeling. You're feeling like this, and you don't know where it's coming from. And because I'm like, just like, and one of my workers is like, I'm almost 30, how can I not own my own home? Why have I made absolutely no progress? Why do I have nothing? Why do I have less than nothing? That's being in debt. Do you remember being young and no debts? If your net worth is negative, that means when a hobo walks by and he sees a nickel on the ground and he reaches down and picks up the nickel, he just went from 0 to 5 cents. Which, if your net worth is negative, he's actually richer than you. How is this happening? That there's like this weight pressing down. So, but it is a message of hope, which is get out of debt as fast as you can, because the musical chairs the music won't always be playing. And if you're out of debt, it means you've sat down. You sat down and was like, okay, this is what I have. And then you can start If you find a nickel on the ground, you just went up one nickel. Another thing, because we were talking about interest on debts, like the SBA loan last time. Hold on. Okay, there we go. Perfect. Hey, this is actually working out. Well, I can see here. Hold on. Yeah, so that the interest becomes like a block. This big old freaking horse pill that just chunks itself right down in the middle. It says, pay me interest. And it starts pushing all of these other things. So you're starting your business, watch your overhead. A game shop. And I get this all the time. Hey, I'm starting a game shop. You've inspired me. Please give me advice. Which is great, and here it is. My advice is, keep your overhead low. I've seen tons of shops, any kind really, mostly game shops. They go out of business because they get into a place and the rent is too high. The rent kills them. Find a reasonable rent, stay small, and build it up a little bit at a time. And that's what I've done with Blue Table Painting. And I'm surprised, I'm grateful. Do not think I'm not humbled by what's happened here. I started out with a table, an old crusty table that I think was in the garage when we moved in. And I had $150 of paints, and I just started painting. And then I added a part-time person. Then I added 2 people. And it's grown successively and reasonably throughout the years. Not get rich quick. It's been struggled so hard, I don't know if I could go back to it. I don't, and I'm a strong, optimistic person. But business has, not business, the tax aspect of it. Everything else has been mostly fun and wonderful and manageable. It's brutal. So I hear the statist whining, oh, but the federal government provides so many services, it's amazing. Think of the burdens they're taking off of you by taking care of your workers. Really? Because if you could just, it's funny because there's a charity downtown, Spanish Fork, that takes donations, and they provide food and clothes for people that are down on their luck. Some of it free, some of it like as a thrift store type of thing. So I went in there, and it occurred to me, I was like, you know what? I'm working on this same problem, but on the supply side. That I'm making jobs for people so that they won't be destitute in the first place. That's the trick. Hold on. Put an idea into your mind. Okay? So, here's person A. Let's say he works and has a job and pays his taxes. So he sends money to the pillars, right? He sends money to, I don't know, maybe there's a Capitol Hill type of thing going on here. By the way, horrible drawing. So he sends money here, and then, oh, please send us money. And then it goes down like this. And then some poor, needy person, let's say, there's a mom and her kids, their father has left them, or maybe he's a drug addict, or maybe he, died in the war or something like that, right? So she gets money, right? Isn't that great? Because this uses force to take it from this guy. See, because this guy, what if he wouldn't have given that up? And that's my point. That's, I guess, not a point. It's a question, really. Because I wonder what would really happen. What would really happen if we got rid of this? Because you lose some in this process. There's regulatory burden, and there's debts, national debts that have interest to be paid, and we just left it like this. And check her out, she's like a cyclops. Okay, I just made her a biops. Okay? A biops, it's a cyclops with 2 eyes. Is it biclops? I don't know. Anyway, so what if we got rid of this and just had this directly, right? But then you might think, well, if you did that, people would be so wicked and selfish and that they would forget their neighbors. And they wouldn't do it voluntarily. But then you're introducing an idea where this person is good. The goodness resides up here. These people down here on the net would not do the right thing and take care of their neighbors. They wouldn't do it. So the goodness resides up here to use the force to make this happen and make sure this person gets the right thing. I don't believe that at all. I'm possibly foolishly and naively optimistic about humanity. Well, I see this in my own neighborhood. I live this. This works. I know it does. Maybe in other places it doesn't. Maybe, generally this is what's needed for a, relatively wicked population. And I use that term loosely, I guess. But consider this. This person needs whatever the service is, right? This is called charity. Charitable giving voluntarily from the heart. So this person needs to receive it. But something I think that's overlooked is that this person needs to give it. I am losing out on something by not doing it directly. Now I don't, because I do. I pay the taxes. Okay, and you pay taxes. You pay them. Because everything you buy has the taxes rolled into it. Everything you eat, breathe, drink, sleep on a mattress, that all has taxes rolled into it. There's no way around it. And it's permeated into everything. So, but this person needs to get it in their heart. And so my beef with Social Security is I should be writing my mother her Social Security check. Yeah, but Sean, you wouldn't have the money to do that. Only wealthy people do. I don't know. I'm still working on that one. Because I could be wrong about all this. It could be this is just a generous and wonderful thing. But I don't think morally you discharge your duty at the ballot box by voting for social programs. I think I really, in a cosmic human sense, I believe it has to be direct. And not just for the person receiving. The person giving needs to do it. It's a human need to give. Yeah, I believe this would happen. Here's a mental exercise. Let's say I press the magic button, beep, all social programs on all levels, down to the county, are completely stopped. It is only individual charitable giving now. So if someone has a handicap in your neighborhood, their family's got to help them, or you have to help them. Neighbors, friends, and family. What would you do differently? What would you do? Would you do more? Would you volunteer more? Would you give more of your resources, even if it hurt? And the question is, well, why don't you do that right now? Answer, because supposedly someone's doing it for you, that it's being taken care of. And I read an article where an old guy had a heart attack at a Target or something, and people just kind of walked around him. I believe it engenders someone else's job to do that and not get involved. And to some extent, that's right, you do need local police who are deputized to go take care of problems that are a little too hot to handle. But taking care of your fellow man, that's a personal thing. And to me, I've got to examine myself. Am I doing everything that I could? Could I do more? Well, that's it for Gatelynomics. Well, that was like an extra long session. It was probably like 40 minutes. So I hope you enjoyed and got your inspiration for the day.